Welcome to Talking Wildfire with Michael Hill. Today I have someone here really interesting. We have Grant Beck back. And Grant has got a really unique background because he crosses over from wildfire to insurance here in Australia. Grant, can you tell us a bit about your background and a little bit more about what you're thinking?
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me back. So my career in the fire service started just over almost 15 years ago now as a volunteer in New South Wales and has progressed to continuing today. Now I live in Queensland and part of Queensland Fire and Rescue. Through that 15-year career, I've held a number of different positions in firefighting, in a firefighting capacity, from bushfire, wildfire, remote area firefighting, aviation, into specialist operations, into helping with triaging and supporting those incident management type roles, as well as then into fire investigation. And that's really what branched me into my paid career in the insurance industry. So almost 10 years ago, I started in the insurance industry as a building assessor. So my background trade is I'm a carpenter builder by trade, and was supporting the insurance industry with building assessments, and that can be anything from a natural disaster that's occurred through to just could be a broken water pipe in the house, a house fire, or anything sort of under those insurable losses, and managed to bring the two together a little bit. So I branched out and specialised in fire investigation in the insurance industry, as well as natural disasters in the insurance industry. So for almost 10 years, supporting the Australian public in insurance through natural disasters throughout Australia, from bushfires, cyclones, floods, hailstorms, all sorts of catastrophe events that have occurred all over the country, which has been exciting. It's taken me lots of different places. But really worked on a real niche that I like to try and get across to people, of bringing the two together. And a big part of that's technology. How can the two industries work cohesively together, and how can technology, advancing technologies, it's always advancing, how can that support everything from the process, how we do our job, all the way down to, at the end of the day, the core of what we do is helping people. So how can we use that to help people? That's a bit about me.
That's great, Grant. Can you tell us a little bit about technology applications that are being done now in the insurance space that you see that could have an application into the wildland firefighting world?
Yeah, sure. The technology's really advanced significantly over the last 10 years that I've been involved in the space, from drones through to geospatial imagery, which can use anything from a drone to a fixed-wing aircraft with a camera, through to utilising satellites, and even down to imagery that we capture from people's phones. Over the last probably 5 years, we've seen a significant advancement in the use of the technology in the insurance space. Predominantly, insurers are a little bit behind the eight ball in wanting to adapt and grab onto technology. But now, the advancements of everyone has a smartphone, and more of those connected ecosystems in how we process claims these days, people lodging online and things like that, is really starting to drive that shift in change and adoption of these technologies out there. We've seen of a number of insurers really start to invest a lot of money and supporting the shift in the technology. And what we're seeing is around that natural disaster space. So how can they support customers, understand the damage of what's occurred from that natural disaster, and how they can support their customers as quick as they can? A couple of examples of those would be, in the fire space, is we're really starting to see more investment in the satellite technology space. When we look at disasters, and a lot of the tools that we use in the insurance space can be platforms, spatial platforms. We're looking at imagery, we're understanding, a before and after image. So we might have an image platform that takes a number of images over the course of a year or a number of years, and we call those blue sky images. And they could be a satellite image or an aerial image that's been taken, similar to like what you see on Google Maps. And then bringing that into then taking another set of that exact same imagery after an event and looking at what's occurred. And by having the use of satellites, we can see things like in a bushfire where we're not looking so much to see like the real clarity of the image to go off, what's the color of their roof, or what's the color of the tiles, or how many tiles are on that roof, or how big is the roof. We're looking more of understanding a much larger aspect of land across Australia. Bushfires predominantly will burn through vast, hundreds and thousands of acres or hectares of land. And so we're really wanting to understand the extent of that damage, and satellites are really good for that. So they'll take a not as clear image, but still a clear image in saying, unclear but clear image to be able to understand what's occurred. And so we can utilize that imagery that gets taken, when we need it, up to every 24 hours. After 24 hours after we know about an event that might have gone through an area, we can start to see and assess that damage remotely before it might be safe for people to return to those areas. And so we can start putting, in the insurance industry, we can start putting those triggers of supporting customers in place straight away. So insurers now can start having conversations with their customers. They might be able to put in place some temporary accommodation because they know the damage that's occurred, emergency funds to support them to be able to obtain clothing or extra items that they may need before they're able to go back or move into temporary accommodation. And so previously, in years prior, those steps might take weeks or in worst case maybe a month before an area might be safe to return. A customer has the ability to call through, and I guess it's one of those things from a customer perspective. It's a positive outcome because they're aware of what's occurred sooner. Sometimes half the trauma that can occur to a customer is not so much the fact of knowing whether they've lost their property or not lost their property, but the understanding of not knowing. They can't go back. They know that there was a lot of fire and smoke around when they left, and being able to know, okay, what's happened? And if it is the worst case scenario where they have lost their property or sustained damage, being able to then have that support knowledge to know, okay, well, that's happened. How am I going to deal with it? What's the support I've got to move forward? So technology in that space is allowing customers, insurers, even down to trades and builders that insurers use to be able to respond much sooner in these events. So that the satellite technology is really supporting that. And we're seeing that not only in the fire space, in the flood space as well. So we can utilize the same type of technology for different perils like floods as well, being able to understand how high the water's gone through an area. And then that helps with the response. How many builders are we going to need to help strip those properties out and make them safe? What are the dryers and what's the potential damage to contents items and things like that? So the satellite technology is really starting to move rapidly in that space. The other part to that is then, okay, we've got all of this imagery, be it from a drone, a fixed wing plane flying over, a satellite that's captured, for example, a large bushfire area. How do we now rapidly review that information? It might be only one house, it might be 1,000 houses. So artificial intelligence, or AI, is now playing a huge part in how we process that imagery. So being able to then capture that imagery is step one, then understanding, utilizing the before and after image. We can use AI to tell us things around the customers. Is the property damaged? Is it not damaged? So they can start to give us answers and literally just spit out a list essentially that says, okay, Grant, we've taken a satellite image of this area for you. We've assessed it based on the previous image, and here's all the properties and the addresses that have been damaged from that. There you go. And that happens in lightning fast speed, faster than you or I could ever process that information, which is a great way of being able to support customers in their time of need. And from an insurance point of view, how do we then use that imagery and that data for the greater good and back to the fire service or emergency services, how can that imagery and how that data be used collectively to support the entire event? Because a lot of the time there is a crossover, and not always is there support there between the two, and not because there's any animosity between the two, but they're two very different organisations, the insurance industry and the emergency services industry. But there's definitely the ability for those two industries to come together and support each other cohesively and through memorandums of understanding to be able to share data that at the end of the day can help support the end user. Someone in Australia that's going through a time of crisis, through a disaster event that needs help, how can that be supported collectively?
Grant, I have a question for you. What
Sure.
is the quality of the information that's coming from the satellite or the drones? Can you actually see which houses are burned, or can you see out on buildings that are burned, or what is the detail that you guys are getting?
Yeah, cool. I'll break it down a little bit to kind of put it in perspective. So, what you would see if you went to Google and used Google Earth or Google Imagery, we look about what they call 15 centimetre-ish quality in that imagery. And so that's a pretty clear image. You can see the house, you can see the street, you can see the colours and all those sorts of things. If we use fixed wing aircraft with ortho mosaic imagery for geospatial, it can get down to 5 centimetre image quality, so to the point you can count roof tiles. In a bushfire event, we predominantly would not use a fixed wing aircraft just because of the area that needs to be covered. There can still be a lot of smoke in the air, and it can be quite difficult to kind of get the clearances and the cost as well to fly an area, given that a lot of what you're flying is predominantly just burnt ground, burnt bushland, or and the structures can be quite far away from each other. So we utilise the satellites. So then we go up obviously higher. So we've got a drone that might go 100 feet above the ground, a plane that might go to 5 or 10,000 feet. And then we're talking around low Earth orbit satellites now that are a few kilometres above up in the air. And we get around 50 centimetre image quality from there. And so, we can definitely see properties. So we can see from the air in a what we call a blue sky image. That's a perfectly fine day. We can see the bushland. We can see property parcels of, a house and a shed and a swimming pool, for example. You can see those quite clearly. And when we take the grey sky, or after the bushfires occurred, we can definitely see if those properties have been damaged or been destroyed. And that can be from the fact that the building's no longer there and you can see the debris on the ground. Sometimes you can see that the roof or the colour of the roof is distorted in colour that might suggest heat patterns where there might be some fire damage but not total loss, for example. And then we can use the previous technology, or there might be a flyover from a plane from a previous time before the fire. We can start to understand the size. So the shed was 10 metres by 10 metres, or the house was 20 metres by 10 metres. And then that helps us to start really costing things. How much will it cost to repair? How long will it take to rebuild? What are the materials we're going to need? All of those sorts of things help the chain down. But the image quality is quite clear to be able to determine, in our where we talk, it's kind of a binary, like a yes or no. Has it been damaged or has it not been damaged? And with the imagery and the AI that we're using, we're definitely hitting that 90% to 95% or better accuracy out of that now, which is really, really great stuff.
Can it see through clouds also?
Yeah, so the imagery that we use for bushfire does struggle with cloud. So if there is cloud, sometimes it might take a couple of shots to be able to get through. The bonus is in flood and other, so a flood peril, we actually don't use like an photo sensor, so to speak. It uses different sensors which work on reflections. So obviously if we can use the reflection of a body of water to be able to determine where that flood water is gone. So flood cloud makes no difference at all because it's all about basically the reflection of an image off a sensor. But in bushfire, clouds can make and smoke with that, the same, almost the same when it comes to the image quality. but predominantly nowadays with the amount of satellites that are up in the sky, and I welcome anyone to jump online and ask Google the question of how many satellites are in the sky. There's a lot. The images that come through are quite rapid. So previously you might get one photo a week, for instance. Now we can get multiple a day. And the bonus is we can overlay those photos. So even if the first photo we captured 20%, we might get another 20% in the next photo, another 20% in the next photo, and they can all join together to create the one image without clouds, essentially. So clouds do, in short, yes, can affect how soon we can get an image, but we have the ability now that we can take photos more regularly.
And to talk for a minute as firefighters, we've talked a little bit about offline that one of the things you're looking for is the black, or the area where a fire has burned, especially over a large expanse. Can you talk a little bit about that for our listeners?
Yeah, so from an image perspective and from a firefighter's perspective, we talk about the black, or where the fire's been. And so that helps us identify where that fire has progressed and travelled through from an insurance point of view, and from a firefighting point of view. There's a huge amount of information there of understanding. Satellites can be used to track a fire. So if the fire is still burning, and we have that continuous taking of imagery from a satellite that's orbiting the Earth, we can help predict potentially where a fire's going. So we're able to use much broader imagery to help us with planning from a firefighting perspective. That also helps with planning for insurance companies, being able to pre-warn customers and say, look, there's a fire coming your way. Please take the relevant steps you need to do to protect yourself, and evacuate or move what items you can. But being able to understand the difference between the black and the unburned is definitely a big part of how that imagery supports.
And Grant, I know you pretty well from over the years, and one of the goals that I have with this series is that I'd like to help different agencies and organizations understand each other better so they could work better together. Is there any messages that you could send? Because you're actually one of the few people standing in both worlds, with the insurance and in fire. How could you see the insurance companies working together with the fire industry better? Is there anything that you could recommend, or any ideas that you have, or technology especially that you think could be crossed over? And what would the insurance like to get back from that?
Yeah. Something I'm very passionate about, Mike, is how can we bring the two industries together? The insurance companies have funding, and governments have funding, and the insurance companies usually have, predominantly in some cases, more funding, and sometimes the government have more funding depending on which ways they are, and some might have more in this case and less in that case. And so the ability for them to come together creates huge opportunities for both services. And that's everything from how they support if we talk about the fire service, could be data sharing that supports everything from the response, the warnings, how they might allocate infrastructure. So it might be how many trucks they're going to need, or helicopters, or personnel on the ground, all those sorts of pieces of key information that they need, all the way through then to rapid impact assessments, so rapid damage assessments that need to occur. They happen both on the insurance side and on the government side as well, the fire service. I think there's huge opportunities there for fire service agencies, and that's everything from forestry to national parks to all of those agencies that are involved in wildfire fighting, through to insurance companies. And that's everything from your basic insurer, like in Australia, you might use your NRMAs or your IAGs or your Suncorps or your Alliances of the world, all the way through to the Insurance Council of Australia, who help bring that collectively together. And so there's huge amounts of opportunity there for all of that collective support to happen, and those bodies to come together. And they do come together during times of crisis. But I think there's more that can be done, especially with technology. And in the off season, if you want to call it that, not that I think there's a lot of off season anymore in the insurance space, times for those two agencies to come together and invest in the technology together, work together, be it on satellite imagery technology or AI, or being able to share that data, because there's data on both sides that will definitely help. Could be emergency service, call data, who's called for help, to mapping that's occurred on this side, to then imagery that occurs to this side, and artificial intelligence and all those sorts of things. I think if the two industries came together, more so in the development of technology, I think there's a huge opportunity there in the development side, because they already work together. I'm not saying that they don't, but there's definitely opportunities to partner in development sides, because we're always wanting to develop, and how can we do things more efficiently, more safely, and at the end of the day support the person that's asking for help.
And Grant, would you have any ideas for possible suggestions about which way that people could look if they were looking at how the insurance and the fire could work together? Would you have any suggestions on the technology that they could be working on? Anything that you see from your space that you think would be good?
Yeah, for sure. I've been lucky enough in the insurance space to be playing with technology now for a solid 5 years, and involved in what we call insurtech in our space. We really are heavily involved in looking into the imagery, because imagery's been around for a long time and the imagery is just getting better, but now bringing AI into that. So AI is a huge player at the moment, and there's good AI and there's bad AI, and all of those things that come with the development of learning. But being able to identify, and I guess a quick example is if there was a bushfire and we were able to identify who was affected quicker, let them know, get them support, but then at the same time understand the building that's been damaged, what the materials are, how much material we're going to need, so then supply chains can be better informed of material bulk ordering that's about to start off the back of an event. Builders that can be early identified to say, okay, well, we know that there's going to be 100 houses to rebuild, and they're all colour bond roofs and they're all timber frames and all those materials that are going to be rapidly needed to help get communities rebuilt. That data is key. The sooner we can have that data to forward plan the response, rebuild, repair, and regrow, I guess a community is huge. So AI is a big part at the moment of how we can rapidly feed information into something and definitely process it a lot quicker than we normally could.
That's great, Grant. And somebody was interested to talk more to you about possible links between the insurance industry and wildfire industry. Would you be open to talking to them?
Yeah, definitely. I'm always open to supporting the greater good, I guess you could call it, Mike. It's all, at the end of the day, my goal and my passion is helping people, and I've been lucky enough to do that for the last 15 years and continue doing that for the next 15, hopefully. But yeah, always happy to help and provide my knowledge and my support, and if that helps grow industries, communities to being able to respond to things better to help people, then yeah, more than happy to help, Mike.
And Grant, do you have an interest in technology and fathering technology along?
Oh, 100%. I think there's always, technology is a growing space. We need to enhance it. We can't turn away from it. It's definitely not going anywhere. But understanding how we can use it in the right ways. There's definitely good technology and bad technology, the same way as there is in any different industry we might look at. Understanding, being able to review, understand, review, and how we use and adopt that technology, and having the right people around and different opinions and different working bodies in the room is really key and important. Different backgrounds and different walks of life really make a good working team when it comes to technology. And a lot of the different working groups that I've been involved have had different people from all sorts of walks of life, and some might have very little experience in one area but have huge passion and huge understanding of the technology rather than the application. And I think that's important as well. So being able to have a good working group of different views and different mindsets comes together to key to adopting technology. And I think it's a great way that we're able to help people moving forward. And it could be a number of different things. One, helping people, how can we use it to hopefully reduce the cost of a premium for a customer as well? If it's something that can reduce the cost of daily of something that a customer needs to buy so that it can help them more, then that's fantastic as well.
And Grant, we talked a lot about satellites, but to talk a little about drones before we go, is there any crossovers you could see there with the drone technology that you're exposed to, and about how that could help possibly within first responders or extended attack on wildfire or national emergencies, for instance, floods, because we all know within our fire space about floods and fires being connected, but also other things like earthquakes or what have you seen that you could talk about within the drones?
Yeah, drones are a huge growing space, and technology. Even if you just look back at 5 years ago, the little drones you'd buy to what you can just buy from JB Hi-Fi these days are quite impressive to what a consumer can just buy as a drone. Drones in Australia are quite heavily regulated, and there's more regulation coming into play with CASA, and which is our Civil Aviation Authority here in Australia. But there's a lot of really good working groups starting around how we can utilise fixed-wing drones, heavy lift drones, things like that, where we're doing drones that are used in more agricultural type scenarios to be able to capture large areas of imagery. So similar to what we do with satellites, but it might not be, we might want to get it sooner. And being able to put a fixed wing drone that can fly a suburb in a couple of hours and start pushing that imagery through to first responders on the ground for triaging, understanding, incident management, all of those things, through to insurers having that imagery to be able to do their damage assessments and throwing that AI over the top. Drones are just another tool that can be used in different applications. I see there's a lot of work going into that space at the moment, which is really exciting, around how we can get different clearances and organisations coming together again. So that's that importance of that coming together for different agencies to be able to go, okay, there's a place for helicopters in the sky, and there's a place for drones in the sky and satellites, and how do we use them, and how does all the different agencies come together to go, well, how does that piece of technology support me and support the good that they're doing, and then how does that get shared through the ecosystem of emergency services and insurance services and builders and repairers and all of the people that come involved. There's a lot in the drone space that's starting to really ramp up again around how they can get clearances to be able to fly these disaster zones with large fixed wing drones sooner. But there's still work to be done in that space, but it's an exciting space to be in.
Grant, if one of our listeners hearing this has got ideas that they would like to father along this talk that we're having now about how the insurance world and the fire world could come together more to help each other within the technology space, would you have any recommendations on what they could do or who they could talk to or different ideas? What could you say?
I think it's still a challenging space, is what I'll say. There's still very separate industries for the greater part, but there's a lot of different events, forums, and things like that are occurring in the insurance space now that are more heavily involved in the disaster response space, and we're seeing a lot more emergency services personnel come to them. So I would highly recommend jumping on to forums like in Australia, the ANZIF. So ANZIF's website, which has a whole list of different events that occur every year, and a lot of different insurance branches ACLA is another one of them. And they're around supporting insurance professionals in furthering their knowledge and coming together in those forums to be able to talk, share ideas, share communities' ideas, and really try and push them forward. And there's lots of different speakers that come to them, and there's been emergency services personnel speakers at them in the past. So there's definitely ways to come across. Still challenging, definitely, to bring the two together, but I'm confident in the coming years, in spaces with some insurers already building those understandings. We see insurers now really partnering with their emergency services. In New South Wales, NRMA has a really close connection to both the SES and the fire service. NRMA have their own firefighting helicopter that they help fund. Suncorp in Queensland do a lot of work with the SES and the emergency services, with the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services sector up here as well. So there are ties, and I definitely recommend if you're in the insurance space, reach out to your different leaders and managers within that space to find out who your people are in your industry that talk with the emergency services. And again, if you're in the emergency services sector, there's definitely areas within those businesses that talk to the insurance space. So definitely reach out and try and find those avenues and start a conversation, because they're usually a lot of fun. So.
Well, Grant, we really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on board with us again and having this interesting talk. And hopefully we can have you back for another talk sometime. Thank you.
Look forward to it, Mike. Thanks.
We're doing this for all of you. If you like what we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. See you next time.